Johnny Klebitz wasn't born a biker, but somewhere along the way the road became his home. He grew up in tough Alderney, looked up to his soldier brother, and once dreamed of joining the army. But dreams shift, and for Johnny, that dream turned into a Harley, a gang patch, and life outside the law. He had morals, sure, but in a world full of betrayal, loyalty only got you so far. Johnny Klebitz, born around 1974 in a place called Alderney, was part of a Jewish family. He had an older brother, Michael, who was actually friends with Billy Gray, the wild leader of the Lost Motorcycle Club, even when Johnny was just a little kid, about 10 years old. Michael grew up to be a soldier serving in Iraq, a completely straight and narrow guy who never quite understood or approved of Johnny's life on the back of a bike, surrounded by criminals. Funnily enough, Johnny, for a big chunk of his childhood, actually wanted to join the army, just like his brother, but as he got older, he started to see things differently. Got a bit disillusioned with how America handled things in the world and decided that wasn't the path for him. It was Billy Gray, the very same guy who would later cause Johnny so much grief, who brought a young Johnny into the Lost MC. Johnny's own records show he was pretty active in the criminal world between 1991 and 1994, which would have been when he was just a teenager, 17 to 20 years old. He even spent some time in prison soon after that, and then again in 2000 for breaking parole. He once joked that he hadn't had a proper salary since he was punching out license plates for a year in the joint. He also mentioned that driving a prison bus felt like driving an 18-wheeler, suggesting he might have had some experience driving big trucks. If you ever looked closely at his jacket, you'd see a patch that proudly declared, "I rode mine to Los Santos in 2004. Johnny wasn't exactly a picture of perfect health. He had a lot of scars on his face from countless brutal fights. A couple over his right eyebrow, one on his left cheek. His nose was noticeably crooked, probably from another rough encounter or an accident. He even had a weak eye, as he'd sometimes say, "Oh, I should use my good eye," if he messed up at a game like air hockey or pool. And from all the motorbike accidents he'd been in, his body was pretty banged up. He walked, ran, and even sprinted a bit slower than other folks. He even had a demonic face tattooed on the right side of his neck and a golden earring in his left ear, though that earring seemed to disappear in later years. Unlike some of the other characters you might meet in Liberty City, Johnny was a big, brawny guy, heavily built, perhaps from all that time spent in prison. He even mentioned he weighed 230 pounds at one point, and let's be honest, Johnny wasn't exactly a stickler for hygiene. He'd often sniff his underarms, looking disgusted, and even a politician, Thomas Stubbs III, once joked about Johnny committing a crime against hygiene because of his body odor. Johnny was a complex guy. Most of the time, he was pretty relaxed and laid back. He liked to think things through, really plan his moves, and wasn't one to jump into risky situations. But push his buttons and he'd get angry fast, turning aggressive and even violent. Despite being a biker, he actually had a limit when it came to killing. He hesitated to kill people he felt didn't deserve it. He even found it hard to get rid of Brian Jeremy and Billy Gray, calling them his brothers even though they betrayed him. He even questioned Elizabetta Torres once, asking if all the killing on a job was really necessary. For Johnny, murder had to be justified. He could do it in cold blood, but there had to be a reason. He'd carry out orders even if he disagreed, though he wouldn't hesitate to grumble about it. He had a cynical view on politics and war, believing they just made the fat cats fatter. He also really disliked cars, calling them cages. When it came to his faith, Johnny felt like he'd given up on it and instead believed in religion, which is an interesting distinction. His favorite tunes were usually blasting from Liberty Rock Radio and Liberty City Hardcore. Johnny's love life was also a bit of a mess. He used to date Ashley Butler, but he ended things because she was having an affair with Billy, and her drug addiction was something Johnny truly believed had ruined her life. Still, despite all that, he clearly cared for her and would drop everything to help her. Like the time she called him needing aid. He even showed sympathy for Roman Belich, a complete stranger, when he was forced to kidnap him to pay off Ashley's debt to a Russian gangster named Dmitry Razgalov. So in 2008, things kicked off in a big way. Billy Gray, the president of the Lost, got arrested for drug dealing and was sent to rehab by the court. With Billy out of the picture, Johnny stepped up as the acting president. He actually managed to do something pretty incredible. He secured a truce with the Lost Old's rivals, the Angels of Death. He even sold Billy's bike to help make it happen, which, as you can imagine, didn't sit well with Billy later. As soon as Billy got out of rehab, all hell broke loose. He was furious about his bike and immediately led the Lost, Johnny included, in an attack on the Angels to get it back. That truce Johnny worked so hard for, gone in a flash. This sparked a whole new war between the two gangs. Johnny was getting more and more annoyed with Billy. Instead of focusing on the club, Billy was back to his old ways, throwing wild parties at the clubhouse. Johnny, on the other hand, was all about business, trying to keep the club running and make money. One day, their lawyer, Dave Grossman, who was also a part-time biker, showed up, and Johnny tried to have a real talk with Billy about their growing differences. Just as they seemed to be getting somewhere, news came in. Some Lost members had been jumped by the Angels of Death. Johnny joined Billy and the others to rescue them. After that, Billy got wind that Jason Michaels, another Lost member, had been killed by some Eastern European guy. Billy blamed the Angels of Death, whipping the gang into a frenzy to attack the Angels clubhouse. During the chaos, Billy found 2 duffel bags full of heroin and, without a second thought, stole them, planning to sell them off. This, of course, just made the tension between him and Johnny even worse. Later, Billy sent Johnny to meet Elizabetta Torres, who had found a buyer for the stolen heroin. Johnny went along with Elizabetta's associates, Nico Bellic and Playboy X, for the deal. But it was a setup. The LCPD swooped in. In the ensuing chaos, Johnny managed to escape with the heroin. Not long after, Billy, still trying to pull strings, sent Johnny to meet Congressman Thomas Stubbs III, a shady politician. Believing Stubbs' connections would be good for the Lost. Johnny even found himself doing some dirty work for Stubbs, murdering people like Arthur Stubbs to help him inherit a fortune, and even a congressman to further Stubbs' re-election. He also took out a guy named Dan, who was working on a case against Stubbs. Johnny, with his strong dislike for politics and his belief that fat cats benefit from everything, probably grumbled to himself the whole time. But he followed orders, helping this fat cat get even fatter. Eventually, the Lost found out the stolen heroin actually belonged to the Triads. Johnny and his best friend Jim Fitzgerald strongly advised returning it to avoid yet another war. After a lot of arguing, Billy and the club's secretary, Brian Jeremy, reluctantly agreed to the exchange. But they refused to actually be part of the deal, choosing to stand guard instead. What Johnny and Jim didn't know was that Billy had already met with the Triad's leader and told him to kill them both on sight. Billy was furious at their disloyalty. As soon as Johnny and Jim met the Triads, they were ambushed, forcing them to ditch the heroin and flee. In the chaos, Billy, trying to make his escape, crashed his bike and was arrested by the police, yelling furiously that Johnny had set him up. With Billy behind bars, Johnny officially became the president of the Lost, but his leadership was immediately challenged by Brian Jeremy, who blamed Johnny for Billy's arrest and had rallied his own loyal group within the gang. There were some failed attempts at peace, but it quickly escalated into a civil war within the Lost. Eventually, Ray Boccino, a criminal who regularly dealt with the Lost and wanted to get back to business, betrayed Brian, telling Johnny where he was hiding. Johnny, reluctant but knowing he had to put an end to it, went and dealt with Brian. While he hesitated to kill Brian because they were once brothers, he understood it was justified for the good of the club. During this time, Jim introduced Johnny to Malk and Deshawn, members of the Uptown Riders. And Johnny even found himself working with them on a few jobs for Elizabetta. Ashley also popped up again, calling Johnny for help because she owed money to Dmitry Raskolov's men. Johnny, though reluctant because of their past and her drug use, agreed to help her. He kidnapped Roman Bellic, Nico's cousin, with Malk's help, delivering him to a warehouse as instructed. It was a tough spot for Johnny as he sympathized with Roman but felt he had no choice. Then Boccino decided it was time for Johnny to pay him back. He reached out through Ashley and instructed Johnny to steal a shipment of diamonds that Tony Prince was about to buy. Johnny pulled it off, successfully stealing the diamonds and hiding them in trash bags for Boccino's men to pick up later. Once the diamonds were recovered, Bacino sent Johnny to go with Niko Bellic to the Libertonian to sell them to the Jewish mob, promising to split the profit. But the deal was ambushed by Luis Lopez, and in the confusion, Johnny decided to betray Bacino, escaping with the money and giving it to Jim. Bacino, furious, had Jim captured and tortured. He then used Jim's phone to lure Johnny to a place called Drusilla's. Johnny and Jim managed to escape and split up, but after dealing with hitmen sent by Bacino, Ashley called Johnny with the devastating news. Jim was dead, secretly killed by Niko. This hit Johnny hard. Jim was his best friend, and Johnny cared about him more than almost anyone else in the gang. After this crushing loss, Thomas Stubbs visited Johnny at the clubhouse, warning him to stay away from Bacino, who was under federal watch and likely headed for jail or worse. Stubbs also revealed something even more shocking. Billy was planning to rat out Johnny and other members of the Lost to get into witness protection. This was the final straw. Johnny rallied the remaining members of the Lost, storming the Alderney State Correctional Facility to silence Billy. The assault was bloody, with many Lost members dying, but Johnny finally executed Billy. He was reluctant to kill his former brother, but Billy's betrayal was undeniable. Johnny and the survivors returned to the clubhouse, only to find it ransacked by Bacino's men. With their Alderney chapter in ruins, Johnny and the other remaining Lost members knew it was over. They decided to burn down their clubhouse, watching it burn from the outside, a fiery end to an era. After the dust settled, Johnny's life was a mess. Billy's betrayal had shattered the Alderney chapter of the Lost, leaving only Johnny, Terry Thorpe, Clay Simmons, and Agnes Martin. Johnny cut ties with Ashley, refusing her request for $40 because he knew she'd just use it for drugs. He even admitted to Angus that he saw no good in Ashley, only that she seemed to F up everything around her. He also broke off with Thomas Stubbs, turning down an offer to work for him and sarcastically wishing him well in his corrupt life. In a phone call with Angus, Johnny revealed his plans to step away from the Lost and the criminal life for a while. He wanted to focus on sending money to Jim's widow and child, using the $2 million he'd stolen from the diamond deal ambush. Johnny, one of the more moral protagonists in the GTA series, actually managed to leave the criminal lifestyle, at least for a while, partly due to the guilt he felt over Jim's death. But the lure of the criminal world, or perhaps just the pull of his old habits, was strong. At some point between 2008 and 2013, Johnny went back to his old ways. He, Terry, Clay, Ashley, and several other Lost members moved to Blaine County, San Andreas, and started a new chapter there. The gang got deeply involved in drugs and arms dealing. This is where things really took a dark turn for Johnny. He became heavily addicted to meth, most likely influenced by Ashley, who he had gotten back together with despite his earlier decision. This addiction changed him. He became much thinner, his skin paler, and his once brawny frame was diminished. He had more visible scars on his face, and he seemed psychologically unstable, easily intimidated and lacking the courage he once had. In Blaine County, the Lost became affiliated with Trevor Phillips, who also ran a trading business there. Their relationship was rocky to say the least. Trevor would often send a hitman to steal from the Lost, and he frequently had sex with Ashley, much to Johnny's dismay. Johnny didn't even appear in Grand Theft Auto Online physically during this time. But Trevor's business partner, Ron Jakowski, mentioned him in a mission, hinting at the troubled relationship between the two. Then came the fall of 2013. Johnny, at his wit's end, decided to confront Trevor about having sex with Ashley again. Unfortunately for Johnny, Trevor had just found out that his old friend Michael Townley was still alive, and he was in a truly volatile state. Trevor snapped. He threw Johnny to the ground, smashed a beer bottle against his face, and then in a brutal display repeatedly stomped on his head. Ron Jakowski, Wade Hebert, and Ashley watched in horror as Johnny uttered his last words, "I messed up." Trevor, without a second thought, left the scene with Ron and Wade to deal with the rest of the Lost chapter, leaving Ashley to mourn over Johnny's lifeless body. Johnny was later briefly mentioned on a bail bond in a conversation between Trevor and a bounty target. He was also mentioned by Melvin, the owner of the Sandy Shores Ammunition. Melvin said Johnny wasn't that bad of a guy, to which Trevor, in his typical disturbing fashion, replied that he had a bit of Johnny on his foot. If Melvin was pining for a reunion, much to Melvin's horror. Even after his brutal death, Johnny's story wasn't quite over. In October 2023, during a Halloween event in Grand Theft Auto Online, Johnny's ghost appeared in Blaine County as part of a Ghosts Exposed documentary series. He haunted the very spot where he died, in front of Trevor's old home in Sandy Shores. His ghost floated in midair with glowing eyes and a slowed, echoing voice, repeating some of his lines from his final confrontation with Trevor, including a slowed-down version of the Lost and Damned ending theme. If you want to see more stories like this, click the video on screen right now.